any kind of art we are doing, it gives you at least a sense of fulfillment at the end.
Hmm.
You just have to pick up a paper and start doing whatever you want to do with it.
Hi, this is Design Lota, the podcast where we talk about life as Indian designers.
I'm Angie.
And I'm Sushi.
So, it's been a while. How have you been, Sushi?
I'm excited for season 3 and what we have lined up. Did you miss me?
Sushi, we've been friends for a while now, and you know what I remembered? About 4 years ago, you made me a birthday gift, which was my own custom coloring book. Remember that?
Yeah, the microscopic creature thing. That was fun to
Yeah,
make.
yeah.
You were talking about how there should be a coloring book for adults too, and I thought it would make a nice surprise.
Little did we know back then that coloring books for adults would really take off. There are some beautifully detailed ones out there these days.
I'm glad we see so much access and openness to art nowadays.
Yes, it does belong to everyone, and art can serve us in so many ways. In today's episode, we're going to talk to Nitasha Sarangi. She's a designer who's been conducting art therapy workshops for the past few years. Hi, Nitasha. Welcome to Design Lota. How have you been? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi Angie, thanks a lot for having me here for the discussion. I'm doing good. Well, I am a graduate from National Institute of Design with an experience of over 7 years in my research and graphic
Hmm.
design profession.
Okay.
I'm currently working at Zensa Technologies at Creatively. I'm
Okay.
also pursuing my master's in psychology from IGNU.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm doing my research in art therapy under the name of Art Babblers.
That's so exciting. You have a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
We want to specifically talk about what you're doing with Art Babblers. So tell us about that. How did you get started with it? What made you jump into art therapy?
Well, actually, basically, I started my research on synesthesia as one of my projects at NID. And post my graduation from NID, I somehow, when I was working with synesthesia only, I came across this term, art therapy, which I found that it had a lot of similarity with synesthesia in terms of experience and the way it works. Like synesthesia, to give you an idea about synesthesia, basically, synesthesia is something where a person sees something when they hear. So basically, or probably hear something when they are seeing something, or there is some kind of
Hmm.
smell, some kind of taste.
Hmm.
So basically, their sense organs or like sense organ related neurons in the brain are wired in a way in
Hmm.
which they kind of pick up the other senses also.
Right.
So that is how I was working on it, and I came across art therapy, which has a similar effect on the brain in terms
Okay.
of have stimulating all the parts of it and having an impact on it.
Hmm.
So when I saw that, I realized that I have been also doing that without knowing about it, and I was
Hmm.
using it in our daily life. So yeah, so I came across the term and I read more upon it. That's how I
Hmm.
delved into art therapy, and I wanted
Okay. Okay.
to make it accessible to people, to everyone who can take benefit from that. That's how Art Fabulous by Nitasha came into the entire picture. And after that,
Hmm.
the entire thing is going on. I have been conducting
Okay.
workshop sessions with various age group people with non-pathological issues. And
Hmm.
I keep on creating different modules and different activities of art therapy
Hmm.
which can be
Hmm.
used
Right.
with people for their issues.
Okay. We do hear these days about people feeling the need to maybe calm down or slow down because of the way, the pace of life generally. And
Absolutely,
we also hear
absolutely.
about, coloring book for adults and things like this. I think it's interesting that you've, designed workshops that go a little deeper into that. So, what would you say is unique about your approach to art therapy?
Well, art therapy is very subjective.
Hmm.
Definitely, coloring books and everything are there in the market, which is
Yeah.
something that anyone can pick up because
Hmm.
art, any which way, has a therapeutic value. So,
Mm-hmm.
even if you are doing a small drawing or you are sketching or you are coloring something, it will help you with your daily life activities and stressors and everything. What I would say is unique with my approach is I try to come up with different kind of modules than what
Hmm.
is present right now in the entire system.
Right.
So I write paper on those. I test it with people, and
Hmm.
that's how I set on my activities that I create.
So your modules are based on, that particular issue that a person might be going through or like an age group. So can you give us an example of like a module that you might work on?
Yeah. For example, let's say I'll give you a case study of one of the people I worked with. Although I cannot mention the name and everything, but
Sure,
I can
sure.
definitely give you a idea about it. So
Okay.
there's this lady who was going through case of PTSD. We call it post-traumatic stress disorder. She got pregnant in 2013,
Mhm.
and 9 weeks into the pregnancy, she suffered a miscarriage,
Okay.
which was traumatic for her
Yeah,
and her husband, of course. But
right.
her partner could come out of it very fast. But she kind of got stuck with the entire thing. She couldn't lead a normal life beyond that. So,
Hmm.
what we did is, I discussed with her, I came up with some activities which basically could nourish her soul or
Hmm.
inner self
Hmm.
and bring her out of that traumatic experience that she had. So we had some activities as very simple as planting some flowering plants and taking care of it,
Hmm.
some pottery, some kintsugi pottery basically.
Hmm.
To give you an idea, kintsugi is something like it's a Japanese technique where a broken piece of ceramic is
Hmm.
stuck together with gold, and
Right.
it is
Hmm.
believed that anything that is broken has its
Hmm.
own charm, right?
Yes.
We did that. We did a lot of art journaling. We did a
Hmm.
lot of photography kind of activity. So basically,
Okay.
it was not just art therapy, it was something like expressive art therapy
Okay.
that we did.
Yeah.
And it kind of helped her out in a long run, and she could come out of her experience and lead a normal life. In fact, she got so much better.
Hmm.
After that, she started pursuing her career, which she had stopped for quite some time.
Okay.
She
Okay.
started doing photography on a regular basis, and
Hmm.
it helped her in her work a lot.
Okay.
So
Okay. Hmm.
art therapy is very individualistic. It
Right.
depends on what a person is going through and what kind of activity can help her. Like here, I took a command decision to take it beyond art therapy, not just focus on art,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
also having some expressive arts therapy where we include activities beyond the domain of art therapy.
Right, right. It's really interesting that it's so centered to that particular person's needs at that time, right? Kind of tailored to them and to understand what they're going through and what might help them as compared to someone else.
Absolutely.
So another angle to what you're doing is also the workshops where you're giving an accessibility to art and kind of empowering people with these
Yes.
skills and experiences so that maybe they can in their own time get into art and use it as a way of just dealing with life. Can you tell us a little bit about the workshops that you've been doing and how that's been going? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So basically, when it comes to workshops, we have to consider the entire group.
Hmm.
And generally, the theme of my workshops are the daily life issues. For example, recently I conducted a workshop on stress management.
Okay.
So we did a lot of activities which could help us with stress management. There were a lot of coloring activities.
Hmm.
There was a lot of movement activities.
Okay.
There were some drawing out of imagination kind of a thing like Zendala.
Mm.
Zendala is a combination of Zentangles and
Okay.
mandala. We did that. We did some movement activity, like I said, basically creating your own movement that you can use to empower yourself when you are going through a stressful situation or
Right.
something. So again, when we are doing a workshop, it's kind of a group related thing. You have to consider a generalized issue and you have to tackle it like that.
Right. Okay. This whole thing of making art accessible, from the point of view of artists and designers, do you think some artistic people feel like, you're giving away something that belongs to us, which would be quite a entitled way of looking at it? But is that something, is a reaction that you see from the other side of artists and designers?
I don't
Hmm.
think so. Of course, there will be some exceptions where people would feel that, okay, I mean, this is something of a elite
Right.
group and it is
Hmm.
going to the
Hmm.
masses. Uh, but I think people are more open minded than we give them credit for.
Hmm.
People are okay with sharing it, and in fact, they should
Right.
be,
Right.
because art is something which should be actually for everyone.
Hmm.
I mean, in schools and everything, we see how much focus we are giving to the academics, and art is like a graded subject where it's like, okay, you do
Hmm.
something and it's just fine and
Right.
everything.
Right.
But um, yeah, it should be for the masses because it has got tremendous value or that, and it can help you with a lot of things with our daily
Yeah.
lives, starting from decision making to stress
Hmm.
management to managing and dealing with grief, pain,
Hmm.
anything. In fact, like, you pick up a issue and art has an answer
Hmm.
to it. So I believe that art should be for
Hmm.
everyone, and if people feel that it shouldn't be, then it's kind of a very
Hmm.
narrow-minded
Hmm.
outlook. But I haven't come across many people who feel so restricted
Okay,
about it.
okay, that's great. And like you said, art, especially in our education system, is viewed as something like an add-on or a hobby, or if you have time, you do it, right? So I think that's an interesting angle.
I think they are
Hmm.
going there. The education system
Hmm.
is changing, and these days people are giving more weightage to extracurricular
Hmm.
activities. And I believe in few years, or probably 10 years
Mhm.
down the line, things will be different. People will be open-minded about it. People will come up with the idea that art should be given equal weightage as other
Right.
subjects. So I think it's progressing towards it.
That's great. When we come to materials, right, you're pretty open with what you use. So, like you talked about movement, and it's not just colors and paper, right? How do you build your activities and kind of tailor them and decide what you're going to use?
So basically, the main idea when it comes to art therapy is it should have that therapeutic value, right, in the right
Right.
direction. What I generally take up into consideration is the group or the individual I'm working with, how comfortable they are with what kind of
Hmm.
materials. So, because my idea is they shouldn't get stuck with a material and face issues with
Hmm.
that, or feel
Right.
intimidated with the
Right.
material. So I keep the materials as simple as possible, like pencil colors,
Hmm.
crayons, and even if I'm using poster color or something, I give them the liberty to work with fingers instead of
Hmm.
brush, because people get little conscious when they're working with brush and they want to stick to the lines and borders and
Right.
everything. A lot of
Hmm.
effort goes there, and that creates a stress
Hmm.
in a way. So I try to keep everything
Hmm.
very simple. Like, if I'm doing some origami activities, so papers and everything
Hmm.
is considered. Having that
Hmm.
simple, it helps in building on the activity more than the
Right.
material.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, so that's
Okay,
about
okay.
it.
So basically, not the tool shouldn't come in the way of what they're trying to do with the workshop.
Exactly. It shouldn't be
Right, right.
intimidating, basically.
Adding to that, I had another question. Like, with art, there's also part of the intimidation is also when you start creating, you look at what you've made and you kind of want approval, so you kind of show it to people and say, what do you think this looks like? Where especially now also with our culture of Instagram and all that, we want that approval, we want people to look at it and say wow. As artists and even regular people, we know not everything you make is going to be wow, but it's still part of the art that you're making. It still
Hmm.
is doing its work in you, even if it's not a masterpiece, right? So how do
Yes.
you deal with that in your workshops, because there are multiple people and they may not always feel okay with showing it, or should you even do they show it, this whole part of showing your work? How do you deal with that?
So that's the challenge that
Mm,
I face with workshops. I have two ways to
mm,
deal with it. One is either I give importance to everyone and
mm,
encourage them, or else I ignore when people start telling that, oh, this person has done an
mm,
amazing job, and I try to explain them that it's not with the quality of it, it's about just
right.
doing it. I'm still figuring that
Mm,
out because it
yeah.
is a challenge, and we kind of are in a
Mm,
system now where approval has become so
mm,
important, like you
mm,
mentioned about Instagram,
yeah.
Facebook, and everything. With social media
Yeah.
coming into a picture, it has become like our habit to
Mm,
get an approval. If I have not got
mm,
enough likes, probably my picture
yeah.
is not
Yeah.
that good, or I'm probably doing something
Yeah.
wrong with
Yeah.
my life, you know. So,
And also, it starts internalizing because this approval mechanism gets into you as well. So, when you yourself make your work, even if nobody is around, you do the self censoring that, this is good enough, this is not good enough. And whereas if you had just done it and just kept it, art is still doing its work. If you're just drawing every day and not showing anyone, there's still a process happening in you.
totally, Angie. I completely agree with you. So, since people are facing and people are going through that culture of approval, that's a challenge, and I think it's not going to go away very soon.
Okay,
So,
okay. So, speaking of therapeutic art, I was doing some reading. I've read that there is therapeutic art and there is a professional practice called art psychotherapy. Can you explain a little bit what the difference is between therapeutic art and art psychotherapy?
sure, sure, sure. Well, there is quite a bit of
Okay.
difference between the two. Art as a therapy, like or therapeutic art, embodies the idea that art making in and of itself is therapeutic, and the creative process is a growth
Hmm.
producing experience. For example, art education with children with disabilities, community art programs for groups, shelters, or neighborhood with economic and social challenges, and for people with
Hmm.
mental illness. These all seem to have a similar goal and objective as that of art
Okay.
as therapy. Whereas when we consider art psychotherapy, it is more symbolic, and it embraces art as a mean of symbolic
Hmm.
communication, and it tries to see a
Okay.
qualitative thing of a personality or a emotion or any other aspect of
Hmm.
human experience. In essence, art expressions are used to enhance verbal exchanges between the therapist and the client in the art
Okay.
psychotherapy approach. And this particular field requires a specific credential
Hmm.
to work on, maybe as a psychologist or a mental health
Hmm.
counselor or the
Right.
likes. Art as a therapy is something little in the
Right.
lighter
Right.
version, where we are using art to express or not really
Hmm.
quantify things. Actually, it's just taking the
Right.
value of art. But when we talk about art psychotherapy, it becomes a little more technical, and maybe, I mean, people with art psychotherapy, people deal with
Yeah.
pathological issues, whereas with art
Hmm.
as therapy, we deal with non
Okay.
pathological
Okay.
issues.
And I think when we were talking before, you were mentioning that sometimes when you do see that this is something which is would be classified as a pathological issue, you do lead them on, refer them to a psychologist, or tell them to like have a formal therapy
Yes,
session
yes,
that
yes,
might help them better.
absolutely. Since I'm doing art as therapy instead of
Right.
art psychotherapy, in any case, clients
Hmm.
come first. And if I'm working with someone and they have certain kind of issue that cannot be dealt with art
Yeah.
as a therapy, I assign them to a psychologist who can help them out with the entire, as in psychotherapy art, basically. Yeah, so that's how I
Okay.
go about
Okay.
it.
So you also mentioned that you've started doing a course on psychology. Do you find is it adding to what you're doing with art as therapy and what you're learning from it?
Well, anything that we learn stays with us till we die. So I think I'm a very curious person in general, and I
Yeah.
like learning new things and taking up new
Mm.
courses and everything. I constantly keep adding to my knowledge bank. Doing a course, this particular course, is
Yeah.
giving me a structure that I can follow, and so that I can know that okay, I have covered all the aspects of psychology that I can put to use in my art therapy research and
Okay.
sessions and workshops. So yeah, it has been helping me quite a bit. I hope I continue with this. Because psychology as a field is quite recent as compared to
Mm.
other medical fields, and it has got a lot of scope. It has or a lot of opportunity to build on
Yeah.
and learn more, research more, discover more, and probably
Mm.
invent
Mm.
more. So yeah, it has been up till now. It has been helping me quite a bit.
Some time ago, we were also speaking about art and its effect on our psyche, and you started talking about the science behind it as well. So, can you share a gist of that for our listeners?
Sure, Angie. So, art as a process stimulates our sense organs and hence the brain in
Hmm.
various different ways, you know. As a result, there's a lot of hormones that are secreted from our glands, like oxytocin, dopamine, endorphin, serotonin, and etc. And these are generally a group of what we can call
Hmm. Hmm.
feel good hormones, you know, and it affects our way we are dealing with our problems, the way we are thinking, you know, having a perception of our
Hmm.
environment and everything. There are four different ways in which hierarchy in which art
Okay.
therapy actually works. First is basic kinesthetic and sensory stimulation, which what happens is, for example, when you're doing an art, you are doing it with your hands, so there is some kind of touch sensation that is going through, there is some smell, there is some vision, there is some noise, you know, where let's say you're just
Right.
using crayons, but there is this little noise of the crayon
Right.
when you are doing it. All these
Hmm.
things together, they kind of stimulate your sense organs, and that is sent to your brain. This actually, you know, it's kind of a great opportunity where it provides you with a coping mechanism with your
Yeah.
day-to-day life. Coming down to the second point, it is perceptual or affective process. Basically, when you're doing an art, you have a kind of perception that you are presenting it
Hmm.
on the paper. So that kind of gives you a idea of what you are doing, how you are
Hmm.
looking at your environment, you know, a kind of introspection that happens there. Coming down to the third point, which is
Mm-hmm.
cognitive and symbolic process. So basically, you have done your art, you know your perception that you have thought
Yeah.
about while doing the art. Now, art therapy is also about introspecting
Hmm.
on what you have done. So, in every workshop and every session, we introspect on what the
Okay.
client has done exactly, and we,
Right.
as in me and the client, together we introspect and we understand what is the symbolic element that is there in
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
art that has been done. You know, once you have done an art, there is always different
Hmm.
levels at which it has been done. Even if a space is left blank, there is a reason
Yeah.
why it
Yeah.
has been left blank, you know. And that's the psychology that we think about and we discuss it. So that is how the third level is achieved. And coming down to
Hmm.
fourth level, which is a creative level, which is basically encompasses all these three level, and it gives a self satisfaction to the the person who is doing the art therapy, and he or she has something to show at the end of the session, and there is a kind of a sense of joy, of fulfillment,
Hmm.
sense of well-being that they take
Right.
from
Right.
this entire activity. So basically, these are the four ways how art therapy actually technically
Hmm.
stimulates the brain, and which leads to the hormones that
Yeah.
I spoke of earlier. And overall, there is a feel good feeling or
Hmm. Hmm.
that comes as an outcome of any kind of art therapy
Okay.
session
Okay.
or workshop.
Wow. Thanks for that detailed answer. I think it really clarifies what's going on when when we are doing
Yeah,
art.
it's very scientific. Actually, art therapy,
Hmm.
maybe like since the name is art therapy,
Hmm.
people consider
Hmm.
it to be very light. But
Right.
my research and my understanding
Hmm.
has been that it is extremely scientific, and I think it should be a part of the it should be included in that because this is extremely scientific.
Right, right. What are some ways in which our listeners and just regular people, how can we use art in our daily lives to just deal with everyday life, or even some serious mental health issues? I understand that there are definitely some issues that require formal therapy. Is there something we can do by ourselves at home with art that can help us deal on a daily basis?
Well, yeah, it's obviously it's very, very, very subjective, like I always mention.
Hmm.
But still, there are some activities that everyone can do, like the simple coloring mandalas or drawing mandalas, or probably sketching in their daily life, or doing emotion art,
Yeah.
which is basically painting anything to your emotion and reflecting on it and to introspect. Any kind of art we are doing, it gives you at least a sense of fulfillment at the end.
Hmm.
You just have to pick up a paper and start doing whatever you want to do with it. You can fold the paper, and it's very interesting to know. All of us, in fact, we have a tendency towards art. For example,
Hmm.
when we are talking on the phone to someone, and if you have a pen and paper,
Yeah.
you would see a lot of people would just scribble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of art,
Yes.
and that's kind of art therapy
Yeah.
actually that they are doing unknowingly.
Right.
You
Right.
know, art can be formally integrated to each one of our lives,
Hmm.
but informally it already exists. We just have to know and introspect on things that we are doing.
Yeah, that's so interesting what you said because what came to my mind is, I have an almost 2-year-old daughter, and her approach and generally, kids' approach to art is so open and so. We were talking about censoring yourself, and they just go for it. So whether it's the paper or it's the ground or they just have all this energy that just needs to come out in some way, and that's so interesting because they just don't feel the need to show someone what they've made. What do you think about, maybe the more we feed it to them they start behaving like us, but I think there's so much to learn from there about just they probably don't even call it art, it's just who they are, right? So
Absolutely. In fact,
yeah.
an interesting point came to my mind when you mentioned this.
Yeah.
So, before even we start learning and writing and reading and everything,
Mm.
every kid um, starts with art first,
That's true.
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And art is so centric to us, actually. We
Mm.
just grow out of it because of our schooling system or
Mm.
the system that we live in,
Mm.
where it is not given that much importance
Mm.
somehow or the other.
Yeah.
But art is within us. It's just very, very, very natural to us.
Yeah.
Even in the ancient past, when cavemen were there,
Yeah. Yeah.
they didn't have everything, but they had art.
Mm.
They used to draw on the caves, they used to draw on things.
Yeah.
They art is a form of documenting
Yeah.
basically. So it's just very natural to
Right,
us.
right. Yeah, it does seem like such an innate part of us that, it can't be shut down. And maybe we need art as therapy now because we've been shutting it down.
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
and we need an avenue for it to come out. So
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about you. I'm sure, when we come up with some initiatives like what you're doing with Art Babblers, there's always a trigger that is a little more personal than. Definitely, I understand your trigger is also to help others, but is there any personal reason that kickstarted it saying, this is something I want to do for others?
That's true. Everything that we start, it always starts with something that has affected us in our
Right.
past. I have gone through a lot of traumatic experience, both physically and mentally, in my
Hmm.
life, and it was every time that art rescued me without me knowing.
Okay.
Also,
Okay.
it was my go-to thing every time I faced an issue. And later on, when I was doing my research, I just realized that I also have been doing the same
Hmm.
thing without knowing that these activities are helping me. And I saw the result, and it was spectacular, completely out of the
Okay.
world.
Okay.
When I started introspecting, which also we do in art therapy, when I started introspecting on the fact that, okay, I have been doing this and this is how it has been
Right.
helping me, I realized I could extend that to others as well and help them to come out of their issues and help them to
Hmm.
heal, help them to deal with their everyday stressors and issues and
Yeah.
grief
Hmm.
and everything. So, yeah, so I think that gave me a kick to more towards, starting Art Babblers as such so that it can help more
Hmm.
people like
Hmm.
it has helped me.
Okay, okay. So you still work as a designer. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how these two parts of your life are influencing each other. So has this experience with Art Babblers changed you as a designer?
Yes, very much. So they are kind of interdependent,
Hmm.
what I see. Like as a designer, I am little more technical and I'm thinking in a systematic way.
Right.
And that kind of helps me in art therapy because to structure the activities and see the result of it, because design is very user
Right.
centric. So what I mean by user centric is it should have the correct impact on your
Hmm.
end users. So similarly, I take that aspect of being a designer into art therapy, where I make it a point that it is very systematic and structured and has a desired
Hmm.
result at
Right.
the end. Uh, Whereas from art therapy perspective, that helps me with my everyday struggles and helps me with real time problem solving and decision making and in
Hmm.
general. Like I said earlier, I am working as a creative lead. So, just to give you
Yeah.
an example, there are times when you have to take command decisions, and art has kind of tuned me to take quick decisions in
Hmm.
life, and that is one of the major ways it has been helping me in the recent time. Other than that, art helps me with working with with people skills. When I'm working with someone, how to handle that, and since I have little bit of knowledge from psychology and
Right.
art therapy, it helps me deal with people
Hmm.
as well, like to know their psyche and deal with them in the daily routine work and
Okay,
everything.
okay. And we talk a lot about empathy as designers, and even on Design Lota, almost every episode we end up coming to empathy because it's such a core aspect of design as a field, because it's all about people. And especially with art therapy, I would think that empathy is something that comes to the forefront of the work you're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so that's really great. So, what's next? What else do you have planned with Art Babblers?
I want art to reach each and every one. That's the major goal,
Hmm.
especially with people struggling from depression, anxiety, or even cancer and
Hmm.
dementia. Currently, I'm dealing with non-pathological
Yeah.
issues, but I am working towards it. I'm doing my master's, like I
Right.
said earlier, and I'm working towards it so that I can extend it clinically to people who are facing major medical
Yeah.
issues and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, so that's the
Okay,
plan.
that's amazing. I think it's so interesting that, this is something that can be a tool to, like you said, it's something that healed the soul of your friend who was going through PTSD. This is something that can be extended to people in different stages of whatever they're going through. So it's a wonderful way to reach out to
Absolutely.
people and be a part of the solution. So thank you for the amazing work you're doing. Thank you for coming on Design Lota to talk about it. Where can people find you online, and can they get involved with you in any way?
Well, I have a
Okay.
website,
Okay.
www.artfabulous.com, and a Facebook and Instagram pages where I update the upcoming events and workshops and some activities. And there is a blog with a lot of topics in art therapy which you
Okay.
can follow, and you can take
Okay.
lead from there. Contact information is also mentioned
Okay.
on the website, so anyone can reach
Okay.
out to me. It need not be anything specific. You can just drop a mail or write on my Facebook page, and I'll
Okay.
reply back.
Okay. That's wonderful. Thanks again, Nitasha, for joining us on Design Lota. We wish you the very best in your work with art babblers in the future.
Thank you, Angie. I'm really glad that we could discuss this because I think this gives big platform to reach out to
Right.
more people so that my mission of making art
Yeah.
more accessible can be achieved.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, it's amazing how we can use art as a simple tool to start dealing with some issues that we may have, especially relating to our mental health.
Yeah, it's so important for us to have practical everyday tools to help us care for ourselves. Sushi, you're into pottery, which Natasha also mentioned. Have you found it calming?
Yeah, definitely calming and quite addictive. I've finally set up a tiny balcony studio where I can lose myself for a few hours.
That's so amazing. I spend time creating things with my daughter. Like, she loves to paint, and we also make things with clay. I learned so much from watching her just imagine and take creative risks, which comes so naturally to her.
I find it very fascinating to see kids seriously
Yeah.
playing, and I think it's one of the finest examples of creative confidence. I feel like we might also have that hidden inside us somewhere.
Absolutely. So let's keep making art to survive and not just for Instagram.
There you go, there's our t shirt quote for this episode. Hey listeners, how do you use art to deal with life?
Or is it music or pottery or gardening or crochet?
Tweet to us at Design Lota or message us on Instagram. We'd love to know about it.
You can find all the references and the complete transcript for this episode on designlota.com.
Join us next time for a much needed conversation on how we can up our productivity as Indian designers.
Until then, bye.
Bye.